Good afternoon. Is anybody else freezing? I come from Canada. I thought it was going to be warm here.
Okay. I think it was warmer in Ottawa.
Yeah, when I woke up this morning, it was warmer in Ottawa than it was here. Anyway, I'm delighted to be here to present the ARIN Treasurer's Report. And as always, I'll remind you that I know the Treasurer's Report is the reason you're all here. I've received a lot of support from the ARIN staff, and I thank them so much for making this presentation so compelling. I'm going to tell you a bit about the work that the Finance Committee has undertaken since I last reported to you in April, after which I'll review the financial results for the 9 months ending September 30th. I'll provide some highlights of the investment portfolio, and then we'll look at some customer growth metrics. The Finance Committee monitors the investment portfolio for compliance with the investment policy statement, and we make any adjustments required in consultation with our investment consultants. At the end of September, the portfolio balance stood at $28.5 million. We reviewed the unaudited financials for the period ending September 30th. And then earlier this year, we also reviewed the IRS 990 form, and we recommended its approval to the board. Once it was approved, it was subsequently filed by staff. The year-to-date financial results are in front of you. Revenues are within 1% of budget, and expenses are 5% under budget, providing us with an operating surplus at the end of the third quarter. Investment income, including appreciation of the investment portfolio, was $2.86 million for the first 9 months of the year. And this is a strong recovery from the dramatic change in the December 2018 portfolio balance that I had to report to you in April. As a result, rather than a budgeted $773,000 increase in net assets for the period ending September 30th, we experienced a $3.5 million increase in our net assets. Operating revenues are detailed on this slide. This is a new slide. We're ahead of budget at this point in the year, and we expect to continue tracking to the budget. The variance that you see is impacted mainly by an increase in maintenance fees. Here are the operating expenses. It's a bit of an eye chart. Much of the time that I spend with staff reviewing the financials is spent on understanding the variances that you see reported here and confirming whether or not they are timing variances, meaning we'll catch up by the end of the year, or whether they are permanent variances, meaning that we have experienced some cost savings or our budgeted amounts will not be realized. Many of the variances that you see here are permanent. So we're currently 5% underspent on our operating expenses, and we expect that trend to continue to the end of the year. Capital expenditures are detailed here for the 9 months ending September 30th, and they're compared with the same period in 2018. You'll note some shifts in the kinds of capital expenditures that ARIN has made in 2019. ARIN's statement of financial position or balance sheet is highlighted here, September 30th, 2019, as compared to September 30th, 2018. Again, this is a new chart for those of you interested in tracking ARIN's financial position. I'm happy to tell you that these results show a very stable position for the organization. ARIN's investment portfolio is allocated into 3 distinct funds, each with a different investment objective. The long-term reserve fund was by far the largest component at $24.7 million at September 30th. The legal defense fund was $2.2 million at the end of September, and the operating reserve fund had a balance of $1.6 million at the end of September. This chart represents or illustrates the investment portfolio balances over the last 7 years, and you'll note the December market correction and the subsequent recovery that we experienced in the first 3 quarters of 2019. Net assets as a percentage of expenses is one metric that can be used to demonstrate the financial health of a not-for-profit organization. Currently, ARIN's net assets are sufficient to cover 19 months of operating expenses. In an effort to provide meaningful metrics, staff has created new slides for the treasurer's presentation. There's a couple in this presentation. These next two show customer growth, and thanks to the RSD team for putting these together. Over the past 4 years, you can see the material growth in customers is in the small categories. This is a graphical representation of registration service plan growth over the same period of the 4 years, not including the end users. So for those of you who see things pictorially, this is a different representation of the growth. And that concludes the treasurer's presentation. Any questions? Whoa.
You have to understand, Nancy, when
This
she took
never
the, when
happens.
Nancy took, oh my goodness, Nancy took the roles. She
Whoa.
watched all the previous Bill and myself be treasurer. She says, how come you guys always got questions? And I never get questions.
Okay, so
be
we-
careful what you ask for.
Yeah, okay.
The honeymoon period is over, yeah.
Apparently. The front mic.
John Olson, Web Highway Communications. Does the fiscal year for ARIN match the calendar year?
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
And the back microphone.
Lee Howard, IPv4.global. Thank you very much. I love the new charts. Those are nice additions. Thank you. When you were talking about the variance in expenses from budgets, there were a couple of items that were, up in the 6 digits. You said most of these were permanent items. Are these changes in objectives? Are these things unforeseen? We budgeted too much money and decided we didn't need to spend it. How would you characterize the variance there? Yeah,
That's actually mine.
That might be staff, not
It
treasury.
depends on the line item, Lee. It really does. In some cases, we realize a cheaper way to do something, so we're able to
Right.
reduce it altogether. In other cases, it's not a question of timing, but it's a question of, well, maybe the need changed or the need disappeared. So, for example, staff. We're taking staff travel down this year by more than $100,000.
Saw that.
My estimate for what we're actually going to spend compared to last year goes up and down month to month because we're also doing things for the last few months we didn't envision at the beginning of the year. We did a RPKI boot camp with one of the peering groups. It wasn't in the budget. So you'd have to ask me on a per line item basis, and I would tell you whether or not it's we found a cheaper way to do it or it's going up and down as my forecast does.
May I ask you about two particular line items then? May I ask you about two particular line items?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
So one of them was employees' salary benefits, $300,000 under. So were those headcount budgeted and not hired, or are those deferred hires? Or
I missed employee what?
employee salaries and benefits?
Okay.
Were those headcount budgeted, not hired, or?
Oh, so we have a number of dynamics there. So there's no way to budget changes in headcount due to changing circumstances. So this year we actually did hire a CFO, and people saw that announcement. The CFO ended up having a major change in personal circumstances and ended up leaving. And therefore, the addition, which wasn't in the original budget plan, and then the subtraction, did quite a bit of swing to the salary line, if that's probably a good way to think about it. We've had other headcount change. We have several people who have moved on to other organizations, and that also has an impact because we end up with a lag until we do the recruitment and backfill.
So you got maybe a headcount to backfill. The other big one that I saw was educational outreach / professional fees was also, I think, $300,000 under. And is that, are there particular circumstances that have changed there too?
So we have to budget a few things in that line item. That line item has services that we get from other people, and in some cases we'll decide not to do something. Like while we do a customer survey, we don't do it every year. While we do a security audit, we do security audits many years, but we actually do an operational audit 1 year and a security audit 1 year. So sometimes the audit that we decide to do or the services we decide to change in the year based on what staff I have available to support the audit. And so that impacts that item. It doesn't mean we're not going to get the job done. It just means I've swapped the years for them.
Okay. And Nancy, just to almost the first thing you said, yes, actually, this is why I stayed for the members' meeting.
Thank you. Can I just add on to John's point? So in that last item, that last variance you're asking about, there was almost $100,000 in there budgeted for the investment portfolio expenses, and due to a change in legislation, that's now netted out against the investment portfolio, so that was a big change in that line item.
Perfect. That's the kind of specificity I was really hoping for.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's great.
Great. Front mic.
Andrew Dole, I like the new charts. On the last two, I think it would be useful to try to see if we could add the end user category onto those and see how that's trending. Specifically, if people are converting to registration services plans out of the end user category. Might be interesting trend to see there. And one aesthetic comment, it looked like on some of the slides, the font got a little squished. So I don't know if that was part of the import or whatever, but might be helpful for people who read slides later.
Okay, we'll work on that. Thanks. Great feedback.
Thank you, Scott.
End user number is in the number slide, not the graph, because if we had put it in the graph, it would have pushed all the archive numbers out. So the number is on the slide before the graph.
Okay, so now I'm going off script. I just want to talk to you about a life lesson that I relearned yesterday. And that life lesson is know your audience. So yesterday, I showed up at the Halloween party with what I thought was an amazing costume. I thought it was fantastic. But I had to explain it to everybody that I saw. And you know what's the sign of a bad costume? If you have to explain it to everyone that you see. Anyway, I went as the paper bag princess. It's a fantastic book. I thought it was a children's literary classic, and it is in Canada. I had no idea. So Robert Munch is an amazing author. He's written some great books. This was one of the first books he wrote, and he's American. However, he moved to Canada and lived in Canada and worked in Canada. And so I had no concept that this was not an American thing. So next time, I will do my research before I show up here with a costume that I have to explain. Anyway, thank you. Yeah, know your audience.